And I'm jumping around, but one last thing I also want to say is how much I appreciate Dennis Connors. Sure. Oh my God. Sure, there's history here, but about 10 years ago, I had what I thought was a sore throat, and it was bugging me, and I thought I had a cold, and I go to my doctor, and my doctor says go to community and get a barium swallow, and I went and got this barium swallow done, and they told me I was aspirating, that I was getting water in my lungs, and that initially it was alarming. And there was some immediate concerns that were alarming, and went through a bracket of tests, and it turned out that it wasn't as bad as what they thought it was going to be. But it's a condition I've inherited from my mother, who got to a point where she couldn't swallow, and I'm doing pretty good. I met a guy recently who died of the same thing at 95. I'll take that. But what happens is I kind of lost the use of my hands. So in some ways. So when I write tonight, forgive me my handwriting, and when I speak to you, and if I have a tremor, that's what it is. It has become a little bit hard to hide, and so that's my deal. But anyways, I mean, you're all here, and this is ridiculous, and I'm blown away by this, and what I just want to say is it's all because of you. It's all because of all of you. I mean, the older I get, the more I think about stories and the merits of stories, and how a story defines community, and how for every child in this city, if we help them figure out their story, they'll be okay. Because once they know their story, then they have their footing, they have a sense of place. And the child who's in trouble is the child with no story, right? And so my job for all those years, and really my job still, I'm still doing it. My job has just been telling stories, and I could never tell stories without you. I mean, and so I am deeply appreciative for everything you've done for me. One thing that I believe, everybody knows this, my business is in trouble. Journalism is in trouble. Newspapers are in trouble. But what I believe is that we cannot let fear, now more than ever, we cannot let fear dictate where we go. And I believe in my heart that a great story is communal, that it has power, that it has fire, and all that happens to a great story online is that it explodes, it cascades, and that there has got to be a way to harness the power of a great story. And that's our hope, that's our faith, that's where we're going. These columns, when I wrote my acknowledgments at the beginning of the book, I sat down. I come to Syracuse in 1988. They put me up in the Hotel Syracuse, and what a feeling it is, finally. For so many years, it was like, you nod your head when you talk about it. They put me up in the Hotel Syracuse, and when I sat down to my acknowledgement, I started writing down names. These unbelievable editors and writers and photographers and graphic artists that I worked with at the Post-Standard. And every time I wrote down a name, there'd be somebody else. And in the end, I got rid of every single name. People who've lived, people who've died, and I've just got to say that the Syracuse Post-Standard changed my life, that every person in that building is a part of who I am, and that it was the most fortunate experience I ever had, and that I'll tell you the way the engine turned down there, the way things worked. People would get calls in classified. The people in classified would get a call from somebody, and they understood. They'd call me and they'd say, "Sean, I think I got a count." I mean, that was how it worked. I can't, the guys out in the mailroom, everybody there understood what I did, just as I hope I understood what they did, because a newspaper turns on so many cylinders. I mean, that miracle, that freaking miracle of how you make a paper and it turns, and the smell, and it goes out and it winds up on your doorstep. I mean, so many people who were a part of that, and it's been the blessing in my life to be part of that business. So I can't talk about anything here tonight without saying thank you to all of them. Quick description of the book, and I talk fast, but I hope you can tolerate that. quick description of the book.
Nothing's changed.
I look around this room and just, I mean, so many people here who are in the book, and the book started out about 4 years ago, and I wrote, I don't think it's exaggerating to say I wrote somewhere in the area of 5,000 columns, you know, over my career at the Post Standard. And I went through them all, and I came up with about 150. So I put them all together, and I wrote a preface, and I put an ending on the thing, and I gave it to the Syracuse University Press. And this was a few years ago, and they sent it out to readers, professional editors, who just beat the daylights. Boom, boom. They tore it to shreds. It's repetitive. It's sloppy. Feels like he threw it together. My preface was about, you know, I wrote my preface about winning the Ernie Pyle Award, you know, like, and it was about me, and the book wasn't about me. So being the adult I am, after they tear it apart like that, I walked away from it for a while. I just didn't work on it. And finally, when I left the paper, I decided, you know, I had some time to really get back to it and to try and do the thing right. And I reminded myself of who and what it was about. And I had a wonderful freaking editor, Allison, who was tough. I got 150 pounds on the table. She says it's got to come down to 85, and if you can't do it, let me help. But what I realized was the thing had to be a story. It had to be a piece of narrative. It had to have an in and an out, a beginning and an end, and it had to make a point. A buddy of mine, Mike Strides, who was also a writer, made that point while we were having coffee one day, and I went back and I tried to do that. When you read it, the last line pertains to Tom Dodderer. The last actual line in the narrative of Columns pertains to Tom Dodderer, who, if you remember, was shot in the face and lost an eye on the north side. And then it pertains to his reaction to that incident and how he sees the world. And I think, you know, let me know. I think it works. I think it works, you know. So one thing I always tell kids when I go up to talk to kids about writing, about storytelling, that telling a story is like a water slide. It's a water slide. You want to get the reader on. You want them to enjoy the ride. You don't want them to be able to get off, but they got to remember how it ends. And I hope this piece worked out that way. So, you know, but what I'm saying about you, about right next door, there used to be, what was it, Brick Alley Bar or whatever they called it, was that right? Right next door, really? 1991. On October 30th, I get the chills, I get the freaking chills talking about this. And I am so grateful for all of you for coming here and for the fact of who you are and what this is. But October 30th, 1990, Wally Howard Jr. is shot to death in the south side of Syracuse. It is a day that none of us who are old enough to remember will ever forget. Blue skies day, the most beautiful autumn day ever. And for us in Syracuse, it was like the day Kennedy got shot. None of us forget that day. And in the months afterwards, I wanted so badly to find out who Wally was. I didn't know who Wally was, and we wrote a lot about him, but we really didn't speak to who he was. So I talked to my editors, and they supported me in this idea of really taking some time to try and figure out who Wally was. But there was one key person who had to come along, and that was Dolores Howard, his mom. Dolores is living, walking history, part of the Great Migration from the South. Came up to Syracuse when the town was the 15th ward, and if you were African American, you couldn't live anyplace else. She was here. She saw that. She gave up her son to this community, but she would not talk to the media. So what I remember is at that Brick Alley Bar on a spring day in 1991, Dolores sits there, the DA's office arranges the meeting, and they say to me, just brace yourself, she's not going to talk to you. So I sit down and I'm with Dolores and I make my case and about what I hope to do, what I think the piece could do. And Dolores Howard says to me, okay. and the immediate upshot of that was that when we wrote the piece, when we did the piece, she let us borrow a box that had one of those little things with Wally's handprint in it when I was a little boy, with a baseball he had signed by Jackie Robinson, with the drumsticks he used in high school, with all these artifacts of his life that were so precious. But the greater upshot is that once Dolores trusted me, the community began to trust me. That because of Dolores, I met Tommy Seals. And because of Tommy Seals, I met Raymond Seals, that amazing guy who goes to the NFL without playing college football. And because of Raymond Seals, when Johnny Gamage died, Johnny Gamage left an envelope on my desk, or told me a couple of weeks before Johnny dies, he called me up, he says, you got some, I need some clippings on ready. And I said, yeah, I can get them for you, Johnny. He says, well, throw them in an envelope, I'll stop by and get them. I kept that envelope. 2 weeks later, he was beaten to death in Pittsburgh for no reason. I kept that envelope on my desk to the day I left the old building. All of this happens because of Dolores. All of this happens because Dolores was willing to trust me with her story.